Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to a continuing education course on stress management during a water damage emergency. Today we have with us Mark Friedman. Mark has worked at Becker since 2005, and he was hired right out of law school by the late Gary Poilikoff. After almost 16 years at the firm, he is now a shareholder and is a board certified by the Florida Bar as a specialist in condominium and plan development law. Mark works with hundreds of condominiums, HOAs, and cooperatives throughout South Florida. However, while all these are great accomplishments, these days, if you ask him what he's most proud of, he'll tell you his twin boys, Liam and Oliver, who are now 18 months old. Thanks for joining us, Mark.
Thank you.
We also have Leanne Caesar with us. Lee is a regional contractor for Super Restoration, has been in the restoration and mitigation industry for over 10 years, earning a deep understanding of the industry and accommodating clients' needs in her numerous number one priority. Partnering through education, Ms. Caesar is an approved instructor by the Department of Business and Professional Regulations, the Florida Department of Financial Services Bureau of Licensing, and Building Owners and Managers International, and offers 18 continuing education courses. Wow, that's a lot of courses. Lee holds a Master's of Business Administration and a marketing degree, as well as a restoration-specific licenses and certifications, including the State of Florida Mold Assessor's License and a Certified Water Restoration Technician by IICRC. Thank you for joining us, Lee.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here, David.
Thank you, guys. David Cohen, the Executive Vice President for ACAM, will be joining us momentarily. But why don't we jump right in, and I will allow Lee to take the reins from here.
Thank you so much. I am happy to do so. I am going to share the sound and also optimize for video clip because we do have an interesting presentation for you today that we hope you're going to enjoy and get a lot from. I can tell you that on behalf of myself and my friend, Mark Friedman, we are very glad that you guys are here today because the topic that we're going to cover, stress management during a water damage emergency, is one that is important. It's one that is relevant. And let's face it, a lot of times I have property managers that ask me, Lee, is there such a thing as a stress-free water damage mitigation project? And the answer is there can be. And hopefully my friend Mark and I are going to be able to share with you guys some tips and some tools that are going to be able to help solidify your contingency plan. We're going to assist you and your team in an effort to make sure that we minimize cost, we minimize damage, we minimize stressors as they relate to water damage emergencies. Now, during the course of this presentation, I can tell you that, in preparation for, we are going to talk about a lot of health concerns, different stressors, but our goal really is going to focus on resolutions. What can we do today? What steps can we take today and implement and execute to make sure that our team is very well prepared when emergencies happen? I can tell you that when emergencies do happen, time is of the essence, and both Mark and I are here to make sure that we give you the information and the tools in an effort to solidify your contingency plan. Mark, is there anything that you want to add before we jumpstart?
Well, other than the fact that that's sort of my pre-COVID picture, and this is what a year of that possibly does to you. It's like they say in the old TV commercial that stress is like the strings of a violin. You need some stress, otherwise you can't play the music, but too much stress will actually break the string. So you want to know how to have coping strategies so that whatever stressors you do have are manageable, but they don't break you or cause you to want to either leave the board or leave your job as a manager. So these are the things that we're going to deal with today.
Absolutely, Mark. And to your point, when we talk about these different stressors and, whether it is too much or it's too little, a really good gauge point is to see how well our team handles these stressors and how our team handles these emergencies. So if we take a look at our contingency plan, and we take a look at how our team is going to respond to these emergencies. Is our team looking at each other and saying, oh my gosh, Mark, I don't know what to do. David, I don't know what to do. Or do we have a water damage emergency and is our team already in line? Do they know what steps to take? Do they know the protocol, the chain of command? And ultimately, do they know what they have to do in order to have each other's back in an effort to mitigate everything the right way? Now, I can tell you that for this presentation and in doing a lot of research for it, I was actually pleasantly surprised because a lot of times in going through our day-to-day operations and going through our everyday stressors, we normally think of stressors as negative stressors, as inconveniences, as things that may give us headaches and things like that. But in doing research for this class, I was pleasantly surprised to learn that there is such a thing as positive stressors. Those by definition are referred to as Eustress. And I think, Mark, you've got a couple of examples of positive stressors, and I do say couple, no pun intended.
Yes, they're called Liam and Oliver, and good stressors, I will say that, but if any of you out there have twins, you'll know that, or newborn babies, you know they eat every 2 hours, and twins don't eat on the same schedule. So when newborn twins are in your house, it is a very good positive stressor, but it is one that requires its own set of coping skills. So that would be something on the positive side. And sometimes those are good. And that's when we talk about the violin string. You need just enough stress in your life. And that's a type of a good stress.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. What about negative stressors?
Well, negative stressors can be anything. Like they say the worst stressors are things like a death in the family, moving, losing a job. Right now, during the COVID-19 epidemic, a lot of people are stressed about everything. And then when it comes to the super stressors, as I like to call them, Lee is going to show you some videos later of what happens when the roof caves in and water's coming in your conference room or condominium unit.
Absolutely. And I can tell you, Mark, those negative stressors, they have physical ramifications at times. And those are the stressors that a lot of times we may not be as mindful of, but we really should be. I can tell you, especially in our day-to-day operations, there are a lot of stressors that walk through our door. There are a lot of stressors that ding us via email or stressors that ding us on our cell phones. And as all of these different stressors compile, we see physical effects of it, and those physical effects may solidify themselves as headaches, different upset stomachs, blood pressure elevations, things like that, that all of a sudden we're like, okay, well, I'm not able to conduct my job or my day-to-day operations in the best way possible because I'm also having I'm suffering from these other symptoms as well. Other stressors that I can tell you we've seen is depression, irritability, susception to addiction, and all of these different things. We understand that being a property manager, being on the board, being a service partner, and dealing with these day-to-day operations may have these other health effects that unfortunately play a role in our day-to-day. As we were continuing to go through this research for this presentation, I came across this one report that was actually very interesting. Now, this report, it is from 2015, but what they did was they surveyed 5,000 property managers across the nation. And they said, okay, on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being completely miserable and 5 being completely ecstatic, how did property managers rank in terms of how happy they were in their careers? On a scale from 1 to 5, Mark, where do you think these property managers rated themselves?
I'm guessing somewhere right in the middle.
Somewhere right in the middle is a good guess. It's a safe guess, and you're right. They averaged right around 2.37. So on a scale from 1 to 5, property managers said, hey, I am about 2 to 2.5% happy with my job. Now, when I look at that number, I know that, there are some things that we can do to try to help, feel a little bit more satisfied, feel a little bit more comfortable, feel less stressed with our jobs. So, Mark and I are hopefully going to be able to give you those tools and tips to solidify your contingency plan and hopefully make you happier in your day-to-day operations. Now, this next slide, I can tell you, I'm going to turn it over to Mark to talk about this, because these different stressors are going to be playing a role in your day-to-day. So Mark, talk to me a little bit about these stressors.
So what I find, I've actually had board members, because I deal with a lot of elderly communities. I've actually had board members call me in tears, wanting to know how they can deal with this. Maybe they shouldn't be on the board. And we have a conversation. I'm more of a counselor at law at that point. And we have a conversation about what they can actually do to do their job and cut down on the stress. I have stressed out managers sometimes call me, and I always let them know that either they could use some of these tips or they can give these tips to the board, because, you know, a happy board president is a happy manager's life, because they're not getting on you for everything that's going on in the building. So I'm going to give you some of these. And while I know that the focus is primarily on fixing the infrastructure problems, I wanted to share a number of tips that I give to these individuals when they call me from time to time. So one of the things that I think is very, very important is that when you're elected to the board, that doesn't mean that it's 24/7, 365, okay? That means that you have a responsibility, fiduciary obligation to the unit owners, but it doesn't mean that your life has to be strapped to the condominium building. So just like any job or just like any responsibility, I mean, think about it, if you were really involved in a corporation outside of the condominium, there would be days of the week or hours of operations when you actually fulfill whatever duty you have. So for example, if it's a super stressful type of condo situation, maybe the president works Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and the vice president handles things Tuesday and Thursday. Or some, like for example, Monday, I'm going to just do from 12 to 4, but the morning, that's mine. And unless there's an emergency, I'm not dealing with condo stuff. So that's one way to do it. Another tip, and this is both legal perspective and emotional perspective, is separate your email. There's nothing worse than in the night when you think you're finally separated from the condominium building to do your own thing, to be scrolling through your personal emails and to see nothing but somebody blowing up your email box with complaints in all capital letters about things that you must do and you must do now. That's like the worst thing that you can do, either as a manager or as a board member. You should have a separate email account. To get a Gmail account, an AOL account, or whatever type of account, it's free. Now, I know at your management company, you probably have an email account assigned to you, but I do know of some managers who are independent managers who actually use an AOL account or other account that is probably combined with personal emails. Board members do it all the time. And if you're a manager, go back to your building and tell them that I said this. And here's another reason. We recently got a demand for official records that they wanted to see all the email correspondences in the build up to a litigation. If this goes to discovery, especially, they're going to be able to get a hold of that whole email account. And there may be things that are on your email that are personal that you wouldn't want to have shared. So from a legal perspective as well, get your own email account. Separate telephone. Don't use your personal telephone number, if possible, for your association business. Have an association phone. Have an association phone number so that you're not getting all kind of calls, especially from the unit owner who's complaining or doesn't like you, who might even call you late at night. And for God's sakes, don't use text messages, because text messages can come in at all hours of the day or night. And the last thing you need to do in the middle of the night while you're trying to get some rest is to hear that chime going off saying that you have a message. If you get stuck up all night, that's definitely going to cause stress. If you're having a board meeting and the unit owners don't want to be quiet, no matter how many times you try to gavel them, do what I call round the wagon. Put the wagon together. In other words, just stand in a circle and then speak softly and get your business done. And when people start screaming that they can't hear you, say, I know you can't hear us. but we're going to conduct our business. And if you get everybody in the room to your fellow unit owners to quiet down, then we'll try to communicate with you, but we still have to take these votes. Delegate and trust. Being a board member or a manager who has an assistant who says, I have to do it myself if you want it done right, is not a way to do things in a stress-free environment. Find people you can trust who can actually do it, whether you have to create committees of people who aren't on the board, hire an assistant manager if the work at a particular building is too much, somebody that you can trust that will actually do what they're supposed to do on time. Pre-plan your relationships. So for example, if you have a relationship with Super Restoration and Leanne, and there's a hurricane and you're one of the people on her list, she'll probably check in with you, or you will have a number that you could reach out to them. And if they only have 100 trucks and there's 105 people that need something done, well, I'm sure the first 100 are going to be the people that they have relationships with. And the other people that decided to wait until after the storm, they'll still get service, but they may have to wait. So pre-plan your relationships. I know when I had a leak in my mom's house, her condo, I had been doing presentations with Leanne. I had her on speed dial on my phone. I had the trucks there within a couple hours. So pre-plan these relationships. We're going to talk about some of the contractual issues later that if you can get ahead of this, it'll become less of a problem as well. Have the Rolodex or phone index with you so you're not scurrying around when there's a leak, especially if you're going to be out of town. I can't tell you how many times I have board members who need something and they'll say, well, I'm in New York right now, and that document is in my condo in Florida. So I'm going to have to see if I can get somebody to go in there and get it. And so that's not a way to alleviate stress. And put together a calendar for the year. So for example, when your annual meeting is supposed to be, so back that date up 60 days and put it on a calendar. This is when the first notice has to go out. Put together things on your calendar that happen every year. Annual meeting, budget meeting, preparation for storms, if you're going to do that type of thing, okay? And know your basic legal rights. So for example, if you know what your legal rights are with regard to breach of fiduciary duty, when a unit owner says you've done it, you'll know whether you've actually done it or not because you've heard about that. If some unit owner says that, well, the leak was caused by the unit upstairs, it's their problem, you'll know that that's not exactly how it works. And we'll talk about a little bit more of the statutory concerns within the presentation later, but know your basic legal rights so that you don't have to be a lawyer, but you'll know that, wait a minute, I heard about that and that doesn't sound right. So now you're not stressed because now you're not feeling that uncertainty that comes with not knowing what you should or shouldn't do. And you're believing unit owners who may be bullying you into a certain way of doing things. Pre-plan for storms by photographing the building each year before June 1st. Having your documents backed up and ensuring repairs are done on individual units. Why do I say that? Well, back in 2004 and 2005, you had a lot of condominium unit owners, and what would they do? If there was a cracked window, they wouldn't take care of it under the maintenance obligations. They would wait for the storm to hit and then claim it was storm damage, and that meant the association had to pay for it. So look at the exterior of the building, document and follow up and send out demand letters to those unit owners so that they fix the things they're supposed to fix for, so it doesn't end up on your tab. If you're doing meetings via Zoom, learn how to use the mute button and also practice ahead of time. I have a few boards that have decided to do Zoom meetings, and guess what? They try Zoom for the first time at the meeting. I'll tell you, when we unfortunately for my boy's first birthday, we were in the middle of the COVID lockdown. We had to have a Zoom meeting. I had videos and pictures and things I wanted to show. I practiced it 12 times just to get it just the way we needed it. When Leanne and I were working on today's presentation, we practiced this in advance so that we would try to make the Zoom as seamless as possible. And if you're doing members meetings via Zoom, do a resolution under Chapter 617 that promotes remote participation. Because remember, your governing documents talk about being present in person or by proxy, right? So the statute under Chapter 617 says that remote participation is possible if the board provides certain guidelines through a resolution. You need at least 48 hours notice to do the resolution, right? You'll need your attorney to prepare that, whomever he or she is. But don't wait till the last minute, or don't wait till after the meeting to find out that you couldn't have done it that way. I'm telling you in advance. So I'm relieving you of one stressor that you can take care of in advance. So these are some of the things that I talk to with board members, and especially some of my older condominium board members, as well as the managers. And this is how one can help alleviate some of the stressors by working with counsel, by getting into a relationship early with whomever you're using for legal or for restoration and mitigation services. Lee?
Thank you, Mark. I especially appreciate that you highlighted, a couple of key things that I tend to, stress a lot to stress, no pun intended, to stress a lot to my property managers and board members as well. And that's pre-planning your relationships. I know that in speaking with property managers, they're like a jack of all trades. They have to know everything about roofing, everything about elevator renovations or landscaping and legal. They have to be counselors, and at times they have to be water restoration technicians as well. But again, if you have those relationships with the service partners that are in those industries that you can lean on, that you can count on, that you can ask those questions and say, hey, am I prepared? Am I protected? What do I need to do right now to make sure that I am better prepared? Whether it's, handling a legal issue that may come your way or a storm that's going to come your way. Ultimately, having those relationships beforehand are going to, assist the property manager with handling these projects, these capital projects, or these emergencies in a smoother way. I can tell you that, contingency planning and having those relationships is important, especially as it relates to the water damages. We understand that water damages do not always occur on a 9 to 5. They are not always on our schedule. They may happen, when you are trying to be on vacation, or it's Friday afternoon at 6 o'clock and you're trying to make your way home, and then all of a sudden a leak springs from a fire sprinkler on the 8th floor. These emergencies, they happen, and they do not care that it's nighttime or weekends or a holiday. So again, all of that contingency planning is going to come to light, and you'll know how prepared you are and how prepared your team is when the emergencies happen. And then the result is a super seamless, very easy process, or a very confusing process that may end up in additional litigation. I can tell you that in speaking with Mark, I wanted to talk to him a lot when it comes to contracts. And we are going to talk a little bit about that, just because we understand that if it's a water damage emergency at 4 o'clock in the morning, you may not be on site. Your board members may not be in site. However, your service partner is going to ask that the association sign a work authorization granting them permission to be on site, to enter the units, and provide the mitigation services that you're going to need. Now, that contract may seem very daunting. That contract may have fine print that you need to be mindful of. That contract may be one that you can sign, but you may not be able to sign. Who's going to be able to sign that? Who is going to allow your service partner to be able to provide service? Is there going to be any delay in them arriving and then actually being able to perform the work because the work authorization agreement or that permission to start service hasn't been signed? Mark, can you talk to us a little bit about these contracts?
Right. So first of all, a couple of things. In a condominium and cooperative, you do have the statutory irrevocable right of access to enter the unit to deal with these types of emergency situations. So if you see water coming out under the door, that is obviously an emergency situation where you need to preserve the unit, the common elements or the common areas of the cooperative, and get in the unit to shut off wherever the water's coming from. And that's something that I have had a case even recently where a manager wasn't fully aware of that, which then caused an issue with the water not being turned off in a timely basis. The second thing is these contracts. So one of the things you have to be very, very careful about with the contracts is what's called an assignment of benefits. So the assignment of benefits is conceptually a good thing. The concept of an assignment of benefit is that I, as the association, I guess in this case, would contact a company because there's water, and I'll just let them deal with my insurance carrier, and I'll just assume that the work's getting done and they're getting paid and go about my business. That's what it's meant to do. Unfortunately, prior to 2019, there was an extremely high number of cases where contractors and other companies took advantage of the situation, because obviously if they're making a claim directly to the insurer, they can charge whatever they want. And it became a problem. So in 2019, section 627.7125 was created, and it talks about what a valid assignment of benefits is. And part of what is important would be for board members and managers to just take a look at that section to make sure that they understand what the law is. Not that they should be negotiating contracts, but just so they understand the basics. They talk about, to be a valid assignment of benefits, it has to be in writing and contain provisions including a rescission notice, a production provision, a disclosure provision, an indemnity provision. And for emergency services, the assignment of benefits is limited to the greater of $3,000 or 1% of the coverage limit. So there's a lot of things that go into that. So one of the reasons that we suggest that you have a mitigation company on standby, and again, I'm not trying to make a sales pitch for Super Restoration or Becker or anybody else, but one of the reasons that it's good to have a contract in hand when you don't have a water leak is so that you can get something ramped up for use when you do have this emergency situation, whether you actually sign it and say, if we ever need it, this is the contract we're going to use, or you just say, Lee, we agree to these terms. We're going to keep this in our drawer. And when we have an issue, these are the terms that your company and the association through its lawyer have agreed to. And then you just have it waiting, because now both sides have agreed to it and you should be able to sign it very quickly. So those are the types of things you have to look for, because the last thing you want to do is to give an assignment of benefits that A, may not be valid under the new law, and B, if it is valid, you don't really understand what you are signing. So these are the reasons that we recommend that you check with legal counsel. I mean, in the middle of the night when you can't reach your lawyer and the water is coming out, you're going to have to sign something. But if you have a contract in hand that's already pre-prepared, and everybody, all of the 20 some odd people, the 23 people that are here on this in this meeting, that's 23 of you that no matter who you use, you could still in advance get that contract reviewed by counsel so that you have something ready to go when that nightmare occurs in the middle of the night.
So Mark, to your point, could this be an example of what that nightmare could look like?
That definitely could be an example of what that nightmare could look like. And sound like.
Mark, they say that the sound of running water is supposed to be very soothing. It's supposed to be very feng shui and make sure that we have no stress in our life. But unfortunately, when the sound of running water is making its way through an association and it's making its way from multiple units and making its way down to the lobby, it is anything but stressless.
Yes,
So
this is true.
yeah, those are the emergencies that we look at. And if you notice in that video that we just saw, it was the middle of the night. So as you mentioned, we have about 23 audience members here, and it's, if you can put yourself in that property manager's shoes and get that call in the middle of the night and then think to yourself, oh boy, what's my next step? So hopefully you would have had, your contracts already laid out. You would have had, your emergency contract service partners already lined up so that your entire team is able to know who they're going to be able to expect on site. They're going to know who is going to be able to help them respond, and also make sure that the association is returned to pre-loss in the safest, easiest, seamless way possible.
Hey, Lee, let me ask you a question. So it's the middle of the night, and this is just a functionality thing. It's the middle of the night. That's my condo. I'm the manager. The president calls me. We call whatever hotline Super Restoration has. How fast would it be before trucks were actually out there, a contract was actually in the hands? What would the timeline be on that?
That is a great question, Mark. And one of the things that, as a property manager, I would ask that question for any one of my service partners. I would ask where their locations are. Well, I want to know where their warehouses are. I want to know where their team members are coming from. I can tell you that on the super restoration, our internal process is the second that we receive that call, whether it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 2 o'clock in the morning, we are immediately dispatching. So your contractor should have a 24-hour number, an 800 number where a live person is going to answer you. You don't want to have to leave a message or speak to an automated system. That is, way back when. So now we have the resources, technology to be able to provide better customer service, swifter customer service, and minimize that response time. If a client was to call us in the middle of the night at 2 o'clock in the morning, we dispatch right away, and we're normally on site within an hour and a half or so. And that allows our team to leave their home at 2 o'clock in the morning, report to the warehouse, and then also head over to the association, wherever that loss may be. I can tell you that it is a lot of planning, but if your service partners have their internal contingency plan straight and also very polished, it's going to alleviate a lot of stressors for you on your end.
I was just going to jump in and say, and from a legal perspective, if your service provider can get there quickly, based on the Condominium Act, the association could, if it was clean water, save a lot of money if this can be dried out very quickly. If it's a dirty water incident or a sewage incident, you can't. But if it's a clean water incident and the trucks are there within a couple hours, start drying out and mitigating, and the sheetrock can be saved, then a lot of money can be saved as well.
And a lot of stressors as well, because I know property managers, if they run an association that has 10 unit owners that were impacted by a water loss, they're going to have 10 homeowners that are calling them every day to find out updates, to find out, different notes and things like that, different details. So if we're able to minimize the extent of damage, we're going to minimize the extent of headaches for the property managers and the board of directors as well. But along with that, Mark, and actually I'm going to toss it back to you, because this is something that we encounter a lot. And especially as it relates to water damage emergencies, where we know that it may have been a result from a water heater in a homeowner's unit, and it impacted multiple units below, or it impacted different common areas, different common elements. And listen, it's the middle of the night. A lot of folks may be hesitant to make that decision to mitigate, because they don't know where their responsibility lies and another person's responsibility begins. So Mark, can you talk to me a little bit about this and the blame game, and how we can minimize this back and forth?
Well, I mean, I have a lot of respect for property managers. I know that when I first started doing this job 16 years ago, property managers were the ones who showed me some of the ropes on how to deal with annual meetings and things like that. I knew the law. They knew the practical way of dealing with boards. But when it comes to boards, I find that the finger tends to get pointed downstream towards the manager. If the manager would have done this, if the manager would have gone into the unit, maybe it's true, maybe it's not true, but sometimes it seems like it's never the problem with the board. And then the manager points the finger at the attorney, and round it goes. The reality is it's a team effort. Everybody's involved in this, whether it's the board giving proper authority to the manager to do certain things. Some managers have their hands tied by the board. I know that there are certain management contracts that actually allow managers specifically in an emergency situation where they can't reach a board member to take action on behalf of the association, and the costs become those of the association. But some boards don't want to permit that, which causes a problem. So one of the things that I think is very important is to make sure that managers know what they're supposed to do when these issues occur. And managers, if you're here today and your board isn't here with you today, you should go back and say, I was at this seminar and we were talking about when there's water damage occurring. And, they said that we really have to get our ducks in a row about what we're supposed to do. And here's what I'd like to suggest as a standard operating procedure. I'll give you an example. So my mom has a brand new condominium unit, and after getting in there and decorating it beautifully, she took this 50-year-old unit and it was immaculate. It looked like a museum. You didn't want to drop a crumb type of thing. And one day I get a call and she says, there's water coming in from my recessed lights in the bedroom. And I know that's not a feature of this place. What do I do? So I went over there, and the first person I see outside walking back and forth in the parking lot like he's supervising is the association president. And I walked over to him and I say, hi, I'm, Mr. and Mrs. Friedman's son. And, I want to make sure that you've called your insurance carrier. And he pointed, just like in this picture here, he pointed to the upstairs unit and he said, it's not our responsibility, it's their responsibility. And at first I didn't want to play the lawyer card because I really don't like to do that. But finally I had to tell him, it's like, look, this is what I do for a living. You have to put your association insurance carrier on notice because there are aspects of the unit that are your maintenance obligations. So put them on notice and do it today. And of course, my parents also put their insurance carrier on notice. But he literally was pointing to the upstairs, saying, we're not doing anything about it. They are. Understanding who is responsible for what is also one of the things that will give you less stress, because I promise you, I stressed him out, okay, by telling him that he had to put his insurance carrier on notice when he didn't realize that. So one of the basic concepts, and this is only really for condominiums, is that under section 718.111.11, which is the provision of the Condominium Act dealing with insurance, there is a voluminous section that deals specifically with insurance and how these issues are handled. And the Condominium Act says that you have to have casualty insurance, and you have to have casualty insurance on all portions of the condominium property as originally constructed, like, kind, and quality. And if there is an insurable claim, the association will file a claim with its carrier, and anything not covered by insurance will be paid for as a common expense. The only things that are excluded are the personal property within the unit and the common elements, the floor, wall, and ceiling coverings, electric fixtures, appliances, water heaters, water filters, built-in cabinets and countertops, window treatments, curtains, drapes, blinds, and anything else that's on those windows, all right, that serve that unit. So those are the things that are excluded. So you have to put your carrier on notice as the association. So in the case of my parents, because Leanne's team got there so quickly, the walls were able to be saved. So the association never had to replace the walls. My parents had to repaint the walls, but that was their responsibility because that was a wall covering. So that becomes the difference. And a lot of associations get very stressed out about it. And sometimes what I do is I will see the bill for the restoration company, and then I'll parse out what is the association's responsibility versus what is the unit owner's responsibility. Because sometimes it gets all kind of jumbled together in the moment, and then we have to break it out to see who's supposed to pay for what. But the thing that's very important in a condominium is to note is that The governing documents are there for your normal maintenance and repair. So if you have a 50-year-old condo and maybe there's a crack in the sheetrock that happened just over time, that's not something the association is repairing. But if there's a water heater that breaks upstairs and causes destruction of the sheetrock, then that's something, that sudden unexpected occurrence would be the association's repair obligations. That's why I said that before a hurricane, which would be a casualty event, that you check the exterior of the building, look for those cracked windows or things that under your documents may be the responsibility of the unit owner. Force them to make the repairs, because a weak window that gets broken out in a storm, if you can't prove that it was faulty maintenance, that could be something that would become the association's responsibility if it wasn't noticed in advance.
Mhm.
Lee?
To your point, there were a couple of things that, as I'm listening to you speak, it's going to be a couple of things that are going to minimize stress for property managers. One of the things that you mentioned was, because my team got there so fast, we were able to save the drywall. But I think the little minute detail that you may have missed is the fact that you made the decision to call a service partner so fast in an effort to save your drywall and mitigate. So again, the initial mitigation, the initial decision to mitigate and save all that building material, it's on you. And in that case, for your folks, I'm very thankful that they were able to make that decision to have that quick response and get a team on site to help them salvage a lot of their building material. And the other thing that I wanted to also highlight was one of the things that you said. You said, hey, I'm in the middle of the night, I'm gonna have my service partner respond to a loss and mitigate. But afterwards, I'm going to take a look at that invoice and separate and say, okay, where does that liability fall? In that case, Mark, I can tell you the service partner should be bending over backwards. They should be able to provide all of that information for the homeowners, for the association, to divvy up the two in an effort to really, stress the collaboration between the homeowners insurance and also the association's insurance.
Although I will say that not all service providers know the correct answer as to who's responsible for what. So sometimes it still has to be revised accordingly.
Well, here's the thing though, and to your point, absolutely. Your service partner should be able to give you the information, and then as a property manager, you have your team, you have your legal counsel to be able to help you decipher and say, okay, how am I best protecting my association and limiting the amount of out-of-pocket expenses that they may have? So reviewing that and having that information is going to alleviate a lot of stressors as well. When a water damage emergency happens, this may be what it looks like. Pipe burst from a water heater, ice maker line that goes, refrigerator line, water intrusion from the exterior making its way in, or a hurricane. No matter where that water intrusion is coming from, we know that once we come on site, your team, your service partner is going to perform water extraction, and they're going to take care of all that standing water. They're going to remove your baseboards. I get asked all the time, guys, do you have to remove my baseboards? As per the IICRC, which is the Institute of Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration, they do stress that, yes, we have to remove baseboards, but now technology allows us to minimize the impact and the invasiveness that we're doing. So while we remove the baseboards and create wall cavities, these wall cavities are about the size of a quarter, and they're created right behind your baseboard. Back in the day when technology wasn't what it is nowadays, we used to have to do 2-foot cuts or 4-foot cuts. That is long ago. So now these little quarter-size wall cavities are installed, and then we're able to ventilate accordingly and dry efficiently in an effort to prevent any secondary damages. When I say preventing any secondary damages, I am talking about that 4-letter M word that nobody likes to hear. Mold is a living organism. It is a fungus. And when we dry effectively, we are effectively preventing mold contamination in your unit. So I cannot stress how important it is for you to make that decision to mitigate effectively and prevent any further damage from your association. Now, the way that your contractor performs this work and really, whether they are the right fit for you. These are questions that should be asked today. Like evaluating your contractor. Talk to me about, the equipment that they have, the services that they have, the response time, documentation. All of that right now, guys, is part of the contingency plan in an effort to minimize all of those stressors. I can tell you that when we go to speak to an association and say, hey, this is what we do. Can we render services? The property manager is going to tell me, okay, I'm going to need your COI. Now, this COI may look a little bit like this. And you're going to have your contractor add your association as an additional insured. And that's fine. But one of the things that I rarely hear a property manager highlight to me and ask me specifically is this coverage: contractors' environmental liability insurance. This is going to be a huge, huge, huge way for you to minimize stress for your association in choosing your restoration company and choosing your service partner for remediation. Our industry, we're in the people business. And I can tell you, our team members, ownership, and I'm sure all your other service partners are the same. They strive for perfection. But because we're in the people industry, perfection doesn't always happen. So in the event that something goes awry in a remediation project that your service partner is conducting at your association, and something goes wrong and it becomes a bigger issue, you want to make sure that your service partner's COI covers you and covers them. Contractors' liability insurance is one that is very important. Not all contractors have it, but in the event that they are performing these services, make sure that they carry it, because that might be one of the biggest things that will give you peace of mind as they are performing this work. Technology is going to be very important as well. Mark, I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot, and I apologize, my friend, but can you tell me about your first cell phone and how does it compare to today's cell phone that you have in your hand right now?
Well, yeah, my first cell phone was like a little flip phone that, one of those little StarTAC phones compared to like the new, super duper iPhone that I can barely figure out all the features of. One could just make calls. This one could do just about anything that I could do. I could even do the Zoom meeting on the phone if I wanted to.
Absolutely. I remember my dad's phone, and when he first had it, he had the big old brick, and he could probably receive a call, hopefully make a call, and that's about the extent of it. Technology nowadays, as you mentioned with the iPhone, we can do just about everything from ordering your dinner to making your way and having it navigate you all the way to Canada if you wanted to. Technology allows us to communicate effectively, be more efficient, and the same thing goes for restoration. Back in the day, we used to have these air movers on the left-hand side. Those air movers are called carpet fans. You may still see them on site, but your service partners should really be using axial movers, which is that little blue guy on the right-hand side. Axial movers pull less power. They are much more efficient. They're able to promote more evaporation, which allows for faster drying time. But because you use less of these units, guys, you're going to have less cords in your common areas, which means you're going to have less tripping hazards. And all of these little building blocks really do lead to minimization of stress when it comes to these water damage emergencies. If you have a contractor that is using the technology on the left to dry your drywall, it's going to probably take them longer. It's going to pull more amperage, which is going to it's going to impact your FP&L bill, your light bill, and then ultimately it's going to create a different stressors for you and for your association. So learning what resources your contractor has is going to be important, as that's going to play a big role in how fast you're going to get into your unit, into your association, and get out as well. Your contractor should all be following the IICRC. That's the Institute of Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration that I referenced a little bit ago. And those two, I can tell you, ANSI standards. ANSI is American National Standard. They give us that seal and certification that we are effectively drying your building properly. We are helping you protect your building properly in an effort to prevent that secondary damage as well. Now, in terms of evaluating your contractor, perception is reality. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, the service partner that you choose to call on to service those homeowners, to service your board, to service your association is going to be a reflection of you. So is your service partner showing up to your association with identification, in uniform? Do they appear to have professional standards, to be able to really take care of your homeowners? Or are they showing up to your association in unmarked vehicles, looking a little shady and maybe not that trustworthy? I can tell you that, having contractors like this is going to raise a lot of questions, and ultimately those questions are going to barrel down to you. So having your contractors SOPs, having their resources, making sure they have the right insurance, all of those little tidbits of information are going to help really solidify your contingency plan and minimize that. Now, Mark, you asked me something a few minutes ago. You said, okay, in the event that a property manager calls super restoration, what's the game plan? I'm going to pose that question, and hopefully, my 23 attendees that are here with us today, ask yourself that question. If you call your restoration company, what should you expect? What is the method of communication? What is the timeliness? And how are you going to receive all of that information? Because I can tell you that the more information you have, the less stressed you are going to be. You mentioned something just a few minutes ago, Mark. You talked about documentation. Documentation, and I'm going to toss a little bit back to you, Mark, but I can tell you documentation in our end, whether it be photos, updates, reports, all of that is going to be very important. In our industry, we call it a CYA. And Mark, CYA, do you know what that stands for?
Yeah, cover your
association.
Backside. Yeah, cover your association.
Cover your association, sir. But on a legal end, I'm sure you're going to want to have all that documentation also to help prepare the property manager and the board for their association as well, correct?
Definitely, and that's something that's very important. And I do know that a lot of the restoration companies do a lot of documentation. You can get hundreds of pictures sometimes before and after a job just to see what they've done, so that you have documentations for your insurance company as well.
Absolutely. As a project is going through, you may have a lot of questions from homeowners. You may have a lot of questions and having to deal with your insurance agent, your insurance adjuster, and your board of directors. For my property managers and board of directors that are here with me, just know that your efforts are very much appreciated. And even though you may not feel it as the emergency is happening, you know that your efforts are highlighted more so when these emergencies happen. So hopefully your contingency plan is tight. Hopefully you have your service partners lined up. As Mark said, hopefully you have all of those relationships pre-planned and your contingency is on point. Your contingency plan is on point, because I can tell you when the emergencies happen, yes, it is very much your team that is highlighted. And hopefully it is strong enough for you to know that your team did well for you and your team did well for your association in an effort to minimize that stress during a water damage emergency.
So we're going to do some questions and answers. We have a few that are in the queue in the chat box. But also, one of the things I don't think we said at the beginning is, if you're a manager who's looking for CAM credit for being here with us today, Leanne and Super Restoration are providing that credit, but we need your CAM license number. So if you want to put that into the chat box, we'll preserve that, and we'll be able to make sure, she'll be able to make sure that you get your credit. So one of the questions talks about, if the wall is destroyed because of a water leak from the upstairs apartment, the neighbor's insurance will cover replacing the wall, but not the painting it or anything that's hung on it if they were destroyed. So that's correct. So the wall itself was a portion of the unit that was originally constructed by the developer. So that would be something that, if it was totally destroyed by the water leak, you would replace that as the association, but you wouldn't paint the sheetrock. You would not put sheetrock. You wouldn't put on any wallpaper or other coverings on the wall. Same with that carpet you saw in Leanne's example where the water was on the floor. You would not replace that carpeting. You would have the carpeting stripped out, and you would make sure that the concrete underlayment was dry, but they would be responsible for putting on the new floor. Lee, I don't know if that was just a video or was an actual super restoration. They wanted to know how long did it take to clean and restore the damage on the video clip?
The one that we just played a little bit ago. So that was a water loss that happened on a Friday. And fortunately, because it was a commercial space, it was unoccupied for the weekend. So we got there, it was Thursday night coming into Friday morning. So we started mitigation efforts Friday, Saturday, and then we were done drying by Monday morning, and we were able to begin the build back for that particular building Monday before 12.
Okay, that was pretty quick.
That was, yes, again,
Do you know how much of that you were able to save, or was it a total loss?
So no, we were able to dry all of that drywall, about 99%. There was about a couple of patches that we were not able to dry, and that was just because it was double drywall.
Okay. Also, what would the best course of action for a property manager to take in efforts to protect their association against an assignment of benefits? Well, again, an assignment of benefits is not an evil thing. An assignment of benefits is actually meant so that, you know, you could take yourself kind of out of the scenario and allow people to, you know, do the work and then get paid by your insurance. But to protect yourself against any kind of abuse from this, the best thing is to discuss with your attorney in advance the requirements of the new statute and probably get a copy of the contract in advance that you think you might need in an emergency, such that it can be vetted before you actually need to use it, so that it's sitting there ready and waiting.
Perfect.
Okay, I don't see any other. Do I have any other questions here?
David is on the line with us. I don't know if I should stop sharing.
Yep, I will take it over from here.
And we do have a couple of people that submitted their CAM numbers into the chat as well.
So
This was very informative.
Thank you, David. And thank you, Mark. I'll make sure to enter everybody's CAM license number by end of day today. So you should be receiving that by tomorrow. And then we'll go ahead and mail out those certificates as well.
Yes, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Lee. This was really informative. We had a great time. I'm David Slinko at ACAM. I want to thank everyone who joined us today. And we look forward to doing these more in the future. If you guys have any questions, you can reach out to me at marketing@acam.com or David Cohen at dcohen@acam.com.
Thank you guys so much. We appreciate you.
Thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Take care.
Thank you.